But hi, everybody. How you doing? It's day 2 for some of you, day 1 for others, but here we all are. Welcome. My name is Alison Gensheimer. I head up marketing for Nielsen, and we are lucky to have this crew up here to talk about audio in marketing, which is, I don't know about you guys, when I joined Nielsen, I hadn't paid much attention to audio, which is a really bad thing. Because when you do start to look at the results, you do start to look at the reach, and you start to look at the engagement, I can honestly say I bought my first security system because the podcast I listened to recommended it and told me it was easy to install.
You're not the only one.
So it does work. But want to definitely introduce these guys up here first and then get to talking about this landscape and how we can take more advantage of it. So go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenn LaRocco. I'm the VP of Technology at SiriusXM Media, which SiriusXM Media represents some of the most iconic audio brands that you all know and love, like Pandora and SoundCloud and SiriusXM Satellite, as well as our suite of podcasts.
And my name is McEvilly. I'm part of the technology team at Canvas Worldwide. We're a full-service media agency. We're very data-heavy, and my favorite part of this is I'm just a huge fan of audio. So when I was asked to participate in this, I was really excited by it.
Very cool. And for those of you who may or may not know, Nielsen has tracked audio for a long time. You can definitely check it up on our website. We produce audio results every quarter, alongside in a similar format to the Gauge and other TV measurement that we do. And if you check that out, you will be surprised to see how many people listen to the radio, how many people are podcasting. And I know when I started to learn that, I became a podcast. I like listening to podcasts. It's my go-to these days. But I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about, like, how have you seen this space change? And what are you seeing happening today?
Yeah, I think what's wild is you're not alone in that, as a marketer in your brand, in your past life, and then also in sort of the data set, is that the trends that we sort of see in this space are the fact that audio is wildly underrepresented because marketers are not actually following consumers and the consumption habits. So if you think about your average consumer, around 30% of their time spent with media is actually spent with audio, and about 9% of your marketing dollars are. That is grossly undervalued in this space, and it's for a bunch of different reasons, right? I think a lot of times, transparently, creative shops don't love digging into audio, and not many of them do it well. We also have sort of a storied history, I think, in terrestrial radio, which is not nearly as measurable as the digital space is, and now ultimately the podcasting space is now. So the consumption patterns have changed, consumers have changed, marketers, let's go.
And then the data that we use then to track then to be able to target and change the strategies has changed drastically over the years too, right? And so now we can really speak to people's interest. We can follow what's going on. And one of the things we were talking about right before this is once we've got that data, once the data that's into an agency, into a brand is quality, it loops right back into our strategy, right? Because everybody talks about what the outcome is, and audio sometimes lives outside of that just because of the quality of data that makes it off to my desk or somebody else's desk in the agency. So it starts right at the very beginning.
Yeah, and I think that's where so much of the first-party data, the data sets, the rich data that actually is in audio, specifically in streaming audio and in podcasting, sometimes gets taken for granted, right? We were talking a little bit before on the fact that, even if you take one of our properties like Pandora, you signed up, you gave us your age, your gender, your zip code, and your email address. I not only know what device you're listening on, I know what kind of music you listen to, what kind of mood that you're currently in. I know if you're in your home, I know if you're in your car, I know if you're on your phone, and all of this then gets populated into some of the data sets that we use inside of clean rooms, inside of partnerships that we have with our agency partners, to be able to really deliver what is core digital media in a really engaging space.
Yeah.
And you can hyper-target based upon what's going on. Just the way that you're listening, and then you can have creative that speaks to that on a regular basis. And that's incredibly effective and somewhat underrepresented from what we were talking about before.
Well, and that always brings up the fun conversation about privacy. And like, how do you manage privacy in that space? And like, what do you guys see happening in the audio space around that?
I mean, I'll let you take this one because I think so much of what we do is reliant on what our agency and brand partners are doing, what they're comfortable with, the data that they're comfortable either populating inside of a clean room or working with us on sort of ingesting.
So I'm going to go back to something, again, we were talking about earlier. I know it's day 1 for a lot of you, it's day 2 for me. I have been excited about the fact that every meeting hasn't started with AI or a clean room as part of the conversation. Okay, these things are becoming part of our agency operations, part of a marketing operation, so that we don't have to talk about it all the time. And when it comes to privacy, we deal with it the way we deal with everything else. A clean room, as our product officer mentions all the time, it's a feature, it's not a function. And so it allows advertisers to move their data into a safe space without an agency, without a creative, without a partner on the other side having to touch it. We can match up on a universal ID at some point and really develop some activation plans which are exciting. We deal with it the way we deal with all other media. And that's fabulous.
What I kind of love about that too is you're right. Last year, I feel like every room we walked into, it was AI, what's AI going to do? Clean rooms, what are clean rooms going to do? And now, because it's a function of media, we can kind of take a step back and really think humanly around what our consumers doing, and not have to spend all of our time really focused on what AI and clean rooms mean. We've kind of moved past that.
Now, that's from a marketing standpoint, and that's from a technology standpoint.
Sure.
We're still working with our legal teams for them to understand what this means. We're working with the client's legal teams to understand what this means also, right? Because we are supremely confident in the solution, but we have to go and we have to sell it across the entire ecosystem. It's not just, here's your campaign, here's your media dollars, and go. There's a broader portion of our advertisers who now have to touch this. And it really comes down to legal for me, the group that we talk to regularly.
What are the key questions and concerns that they're bringing up that you're having to help them overcome to start to operate in this way?
We have to help them understand that sharing this data is not going to be in a violation of any regulations that they have straight up, right? And so, I don't want to touch their data. I don't. I do not. The policy of, see a couple of my coworkers here. The policy used to be, what are we going to do about PII? And my response was, no, oh God, no. Right? Because that was it. We don't want to touch it. I'm getting a head nod from our biz dev head. And that was because we are not necessarily best suited to deal with it, right? An advertiser is. And so by helping foster a relationship between an advertiser and a clean room provider, Snowflake, the function, anybody that you want to use out there, InfoSum, whoever it is, foster that relationship. The information match lives there. It's an ephemeral relationship. It will disappear when we're done with a campaign, when we're done with activation. Now, all of a sudden, once you start to have that conversation, teams start to understand what it means.
And I think ultimately how that impacts the efficacy of not just a particular partner, but an entire medium like audio, is the fact that once you have really good data in, you have really good sustainable understanding of who you're reaching and who your consumers are, and you've worked through these partnerships, now we can start to talk about the efficacy of it. Now we can start to talk about what does measurement actually mean. Now we can start to talk about what attribution models look like that take into consideration everything that a particular medium brings to the table.
I think it's interesting when you and I were talking earlier, and I've heard it from so many people in the audio industry say, like, the MMM models don't represent us, like we don't show up. And we work with a lot of radio and audio clients, and it's true, but then you start to get into some of the models do show. So what do you think is hindering, A, radio showing up in the MMM models, and B, just like really starting to get that adoption? We started to see it a little bit through the election and in local, but all the data says this is where the consumer is. So what's holding everybody back?
Well, I think you kind of said it without saying it, is why isn't radio measured right? I don't think radio, digital audio, streaming audio, and podcasting are nearly the same thing. And I think if you're a sophisticated audio marketer, you understand what I mean by that, in the sense that, let's say you're advertiser X and you have a historic MMM model, and I tell you you're running a video ad on Pandora, or you're running a display ad on SoundCloud. Where are you putting that? 3 different advertisers will tell you 3 different things. It falls into digital, or, well, it falls into audio. Well, we do it by creative. And unless you have really good data in and a good understanding of what you're measuring and a level of sophistication, which is what all these systems provide, is right, that time to be able to say, I don't have to worry about this. I can actually focus on what actually is my media doing. Then you can start to have really incredible conversations with your consumer.
And the data will help us fight a bias, right? It's very easy for somebody to walk and say, oh, radio's dead, right? And then they move on in, but it's not. And a lot of times it's a conversation, it's showing the data, it's doing some testing and bringing it forward to show the value of it, and then making it part of the overall plan. And we need, from my end, I need the data to be able to provide to the strategy teams, the client teams, to say, look, here it is, but it doesn't always get to us in a good, in a good method, because it might be a throw in here or there, depending upon what one of our clients wants to do with audio.
So how do you recommend people start with audio? Like if we've got this kind of barrier to entry that we're dealing with either from perception that is not close to reality, and we're getting over some of the data, and there's some rich data in the space, how do you recommend people get started to start integrating these into their plans or even start thinking about it?
I mean, a lot of that just goes back to understanding your consumer and what your consumer is doing, right? Because every marketer is going to have a different consumer, where they are in the journey, the need, the KPI for a particular campaign or a business use that they need to solve for. And so it really comes down to that of like, what do you need to do? Where's the gaps that you don't have filled right now? And one of those things that's really interesting is we talk to a lot of our brands around incremental reach and what does that actually mean? Because audio is one of those mediums in which incrementality is incredibly unique in the sense that almost 70% of the time that you're listening to an audio ad, you do not have the opportunity to speak to a consumer any other way. Whether they're out for a jog, whether they're cleaning their home, whether all of these things that feel like places in which particular brands have a right to be there and also are need states for our consumers, you're just not talking to them. Right? And so I think those are interesting places in which you need to start to think about what is it that you're trying to do as a brand? Where are the gaps that this can actually provide a really interesting space for you, regardless of where we're talking about in the funnel? And then creative is a whole nother conversation.
I think it's fair to say it is an ignored medium for speaking right to people's issues, whatever it is. I had drinks with a friend of mine who works at an ag radio network, and I was making fun of her. I was like, come on, And then she started talking about the agencies that they deal with. She was talking about, their advertisers, and my eyes popped. And all of a sudden you're looking at wheat maps in Texas and looking at the radio networks that are supporting it. And it's a reminder that you have to reach people where they're comfortable, in the right channel. And audio does that. Podcasts do that. Satellite radio does that. It really kind of allows us to consume the media in a way that makes sense to us and be hyper-focused on that thing that's important to us at the moment.
It's really interesting because I think there's also, where there's a disparity in understanding scale of consumption in audio, there's also a disparity of understanding the relevancy of audio platforms in the sense that, that is a small platform, I'm assuming, as far as scale goes. SiriusXM Media is a gigantic conglomerate of 160 million people that you want to talk to every single month. We were talking a little bit before, I think it goes unnoticed a little bit in the sense that, in Q3 we were a $450 million ad business. Like, this is not small, it's just, as an industry, we need to start to recognize the fact that there's huge scalable opportunity here. And as marketers who are looking for white space, this is absolutely a space that you need to look at.
And I remember when I first heard Pandora pitch, I'm gonna date myself here, but I thought it was the coolest thing in the world that they could detect when I was actually going to be listening versus when I was gonna be watching, and be able to shift the ad between going from a digital ad to a video ad, which is kind of funny when you bring it up in the MMM model. Where does that live? It is a different medium, but getting to data seems to be the way that marketers are getting to decisions these days. So what is that barrier to get over the clean room hump? I mean, do clean rooms still scare people? I know when in my days as a marketer, clean rooms scared the crap out of my legal and compliance people, as well as my technology people. They had no idea how to even conceive of that. So how do we help them get there? How do we help them get more comfortable?
Oh, you're looking at me.
Oh, I'm really looking, I'm comfortable.
Yeah, she's good. I'm good, but we need your help.
These are all stereotypical answers,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry for that. And it's not what you want to hear after lunch. It's education, it's transparency, and it's not, you can't say trust us, right? But you've got to go through and you've got to show the data. You've got to be able to say, start small. We can pull this back. Start small. Let us show you how this works. Let us show you the value of this. And you have to chip away at it. We're using technology to drive a cultural change. And I hate that. Technology has driven cultural change, but we're trying to force it, right? We're trying to grab a crowbar and push it across that. And that is a recipe for disaster. It absolutely is. But we want to get people interested in this and drive it forward that way. It is an incrementalist approach until it's not, and then the dam should break on that. And we're seeing it, and we are seeing it in areas, right? And we are absolutely seeing it in areas. We're not seeing it in your area right now, certainly, but that'll change.
But what are the top, like, 2 or 3 use cases then where you're seeing people really drive to adoption? Because those usually are either the places where people spend the most money.
We're seeing it in connected TV, right? We're
It's
seeing all the
connected TV,
programmatic
yeah.
execution, right? Here's your identity spine. Here's where we match up and do it. I'm sorry, but isn't that exactly what we're doing? Isn't that a clean room definition right there that we've done that?
Yeah.
So then why, when we move to a different media type, do we treat it differently?
Well, and you looked at the subscriber model that you guys have and the amount of data, it's the same thing. So it's just an easy way for me to see that, audio could really just jump into the space is really through there.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, we have a robust amount of first-party data that we can feed into so many systems to be able to offer an opportunity for marketers to reach consumers in the right way and in the most impactful way.
Cool. Anybody, questions or comments from the audience? You guys got anything? Go ahead.
I'm sorry to raise the Damon of AI thing, but one of the things that I continue to hear is the consumption of media. And what we've been talking about for 20 some odd years is interactive media. When are we going to be able to turn the audio medium into brand conversations instead of just consumption?
In the sense that you want to have conversational AI in with?
Could be conversational AI.
Look, I think there are things that we've explored absolutely in this space a few years ago. We started to play around with, when you're in the car, is there an opportunity for us to have voice-activated ads and have that ad then understand what you were saying? And again, it's a very basic level of kind of what you're talking about. I think where you start to see AI, where you will and have started to see AI show up a little bit more in audio creative is the sense that we're thinking about synthetic voice and what does that mean. We're also thinking about conversational AI and what does that mean in creative. The challenge is, and I'll be quite frank, is advertisers haven't done a good job at audio creative to begin with. So to think that they're sophisticated in this space enough to be able to introduce conversational AI, yeah, I'd love to get there, but we've got to get the base work done first. I will say for us, it's stuff that we play around with all of the time. There are things that we challenge the space in, but also in a level of responsibility in which we want to make sure in this space that creators are compensated appropriately, that voice actors don't lose that level of control over their own voice. And so there's a lot of things that we work with in that space, whether it's synthetic or it's taking the scalability of a voice actor's voice into real heavy consideration. But again, we need marketers to be there with us, and they're not there yet.
There's so many things you just brought up in that we could talk about. I mean, one of them is I remember when, as a digital marketer, I don't know how many people remember this, but you get cut down TV ads to put out there, right? You're like, the TV ad gets produced, all the money goes into it, they throw the cut down TV ad to the digital marketer, and then all of a sudden, there's no branding, there's a story that goes that you got to go in 30 seconds, the logo's not seen, and they've already scrolled past it in the feed. What makes it, who's doing audio well? What's making, we're talking about audio, I think of it almost as influencer marketing at this point.
Well, that goes back to this level of sophistication in audio, right? Because if you're talking about a host read inside of a podcast versus a streaming ad versus something you're doing on terrestrial radio, those are all wildly different best cases, right? I could give you examples of people who have brands that have incredible mnemonics. I could give you examples of brands that have incredible sonic identities. I can give you an example of a brand that had one piece of creative that's done right, but at the end of the day, it is not the focus of the ECD. Like, it is not what gets done first. It's what gets done last. And until that starts to get brought to the forefront, there's just a level of sophistication that isn't quite there yet. But I think brands are working on it. And again, they're starting to follow these consumption patterns. It's just a matter of when it's going to really have the level of importance that consumers have raised their hand and said, this is important to me.
It really sounds like this is one of the few areas where we've been where the technology is all here and ready to go. Right? Often it's like, I got this idea, and what do I need the technology to activate this? And here we are, and we've got all this available to us, and we just need these changes in approach to make this happen. And it's a unique challenge for all of us in the room, because so many of us in our career haven't had this kind of problem.
No, for sure. Yeah, it's so fascinating to me that's such a great point. You're always complaining the technology is not there.
It's here.
Technology's here.
It's all here. It's all here. So what's going to get people over that hump? I love your point about it's not one creative fits all. You really, and maybe that is one of the challenges. I worked for a financial services industry, and the idea of letting somebody I could not control put their own voice into a message was just like, I couldn't get that past legal and compliance. They're like, we can't control what they're gonna say. Are you crazy? But yet, there's an entire content creator industry out there that is a massive advertising space.
Live reads work.
Right? Yeah.
It works on terrestrial, it works on podcasts, it works everywhere.
I mean, I personally believe it's influencer marketing. Maybe I'm wrong here,
No,
but
absolutely.
No, you're right.
It absolutely is. It is the same, and I would almost say even more so of a personal execution, in the sense that you have someone who is inside the ears of your consumers for hours. And they're not just listening to whatever content they happen to be producing. It could be lifestyle, it could be true crime, it could be the news, it could be anything. These people are offering up multiple instances in which they're bringing you into their living rooms, they're putting you on their couch next to them. And when they endorse a brand, all of our talent is very mindful around what brands that they sign on for, because they recognize if there's a level of authenticity that is, or a level of inauthenticity that is sniffed out at any point, whether it's in the content or it's in the creative, they're done. Like, that's it. And so it is influencer marketing to an even higher level, because podcast hosts at large have just created this standard that is unmatched, I think, in influencer marketing.
Your area of expertise, so forgive me for putting it this way. I live in New York City. I take the subway every day. I stick my AirPods when I leave. I fire up my podcast. I ignore people I know on the subway. Thank God for AirPods. But the reality is, I can be engaging in 14 different things on that commute, and yet I am a captive audience into what is in my ear.
Yes.
That is what I am focusing on, and that's what's getting forgotten in all of this about audio. The minute you are in my ear, I am a captive audience. I am not on an e-reader and checking email on the side, and I think there's tremendous value in that.
Yeah, we like to say you can close your eyes, but you can't turn off your ears.
I have a 20-year-old son. Yes, you can.
Any other questions, guys?
Over there.
Go ahead.
Jen, working in the out-of-home space for 20 years, I feel your pain with the MMA model.
I got
Exactly
you.
the same- by the way,
I got
exactly the
you.
same
We'll
argument,
hang
yeah.
after this.
We need to hang out
Listen,
after
you're having a moment, and I like it.
We are.
I love that for out of home, to be
Yeah.
honest.
So I think, so building upon maybe taking 5 years back, so programmatic, the rise of programmatic, now out of home being a part of it, do you believe that technology from the demand side, it's the investment like out of home, mobile, audio, it's too much work to connect? Because what I feel on the podcast side of things specifically is, just like search, could you have keywords that when XYZ podcaster says it, bid to buy real time, then it triggers that. But do the two of you feel that it's more of a technology, there's not so much money in it, so therefore DSP XYZ doesn't want to invest in building that tech to integrate in because there's more money in social, online, and CTV?
I love that you're not a plant, but you asked this question because we can contextually target inside of podcasting. So that's the short answer. The long answer is, what's interesting is that the podcasting space has rapidly become just as advanced as the streaming audio space. It took the streaming audio space 15 years. It took podcasting 3. You know, there was a model there already. There's still a little bit of a ways to go, but the ease of purchase, the programmatic models, the level of targeting, the digital attribution at this point, dynamically inserted ads, all of those things came rapidly into the space in a way in which now it started to get up to par and almost to par with streaming audio. And so, yeah, all of those advancements are there. Again, the technology is there.
Technology is there. I am not a media planner. Let me pretend I am. My comments are going to be, there's a lot of content out there. I'm thinking about brand safety. I'm thinking about appropriate venues where I want my message to be heard. I'm not worrying about the technology. That is a big conversation to have with an advertiser, right? And we need a lot of help to have that. And so, by the way, the fact that we can talk about audio that way is awesome.
Yeah.
It really is.
More questions, guys? You don't know radio, I'm telling you. Who knew radio was so technology advanced? Any last thoughts, guys?
No, this has been great. I think, obviously we've said it ad nauseum, but if you're a marketer in this space, this is absolutely something that you need to explore if you're not fully sort of bought in, talk to your agency partners, talk to any of your audio partners, talk to your strategy teams, take a look at consumption patterns. It's pretty insane, and I think you'll be surprised.
And I'll take it more of a personal level. If you think about the 20 minutes that you've spent with us and you think about audio and you say, let me be aware for 2 days of where I'm taking in messaging. And you are going to recognize how much of it is audio. You're going to get into your car, hopefully a Hyundai Kia Genesis product, and you'll have 35 inches worth of screen. If you have an old car like I do and you've got an analog radio that's sitting there, and you recognize that audio is your constant companion. And it's really just a question of how do you use it effectively. And then if you make it digital, I can track it, and I can make it more effective for you.
Yeah, I love this conversation. Every time I meet and get the opportunity to talk to people in the audio space, I learn so much more. So thank you guys so much for having us here.
Thank
you guys for
you.
joining.
Thank you guys.